Then good morning, everybody. Let me first say how sorry I am that I'm not with you in the room. It looks really like a very exciting conference that I'm missing. But at least I can be with you virtually. So let me share my screen to step into. So I'm going to tell you in a brief presentation the practical tools and solutions that WWF and its many committed partners have developed over the past 10 years or so. But before doing so, let me just give you a super brief introduction to WWF Central and Eastern Europe. Our purpose is to save the globally important forests, rivers, wetlands, and species in the green heart of Europe. And what we call the green heart of Europe, you see on this map. These are the countries we are working in. They are 7 all in all, with 6 registered offices. And of course, one very important country we are active in is Romania. Why is WWF working in this region? A very important reason is the relatively large natural landscapes that are left, in particular in the Carpathians. Here on the map, I've highlighted a few of our priority landscapes in the Carpathians. And of course, these natural, large, connected, relatively well-connected landscapes, they also are home to species that have become very rare in other parts of Europe. In particular, large mammals, such large carnivores. Our focus is on wolves, lynx, bears, but we are also working on the reintroduction of bison, which is possible because of these large natural landscapes. Well, these assets, these connected, beautiful natural landscapes, they are under threat from development. And we have identified in the partnerships that we have worked in the challenges that make these developments a threat. It's a low level of understanding of the importance of ecological connectivity, why it is not only important to nature, but also to people. It's also a challenge. It's difficult to balance people's needs, wishes for a safer and better life, which also implies infrastructure, while at the same time also conserving the beautiful nature that in the end people also depend on. There's insufficient experience among authorities and engineers how to incorporate eco-connectivity into planning procedures. And what we've also observed is insufficient cross-sectoral cooperation and early engagement of all these different stakeholder groups that need to have a say in planning infrastructure, in particular linear infrastructure. So such people coming together as those being engaged in nature conservation, the spatial planners, the transport experts, but also agricultural planners and so on. And we are also, at least in the region here, in the Carpathian region, suffering from a lack of baseline data, biodiversity baseline data, which of course are central to informed decisions. And there's a low level of law implementation. So what is the response that we have developed in the partnerships that we have engaged in over the past 10 years or so? To counteract those challenges that I have listed, we have been fostering collaboration of key stakeholders over a long period of time so that trust can be built and these different stakeholders become allies. We have also strengthened the multidisciplinary approach. We have built capacity, strengthened also the database, developed tools and methods. We have also engaged in policy advocacy towards national, EU level, but also regional level platforms. And we have raised awareness. And I'm going to have just give you a very brief insight into each of these points. So about stakeholder cooperation, we have been very lucky to have received grants from the Interact program, 3 consecutive projects that gave us the possibility to strengthen partnerships and foster this stakeholder cooperation, which is so essential. This has also gained one of the partnerships, TRANSGREEN, a very prestigious award in the category of cooperation and networking. About cross-sectoral multidisciplinary collaboration, it's clear that this implies bringing together groups that very often just don't talk to each other, don't have a history of talking to each other. And the starting point is often a low level of trust. I mean, we are talking about nature conservation NGOs, very passionate about the natural environment, authorities at different levels, local communities, scientific institutions, experts, general public. Through these various projects, we have made these different stakeholder groups understand to understand the position of other stakeholder groups, and thereby come together on a more trustful basis. And yeah, that is certainly among, I would say, essence of success. Another point about multidisciplinary collaboration, this has also led to very practical recommendations as a result, catalogs of measures, how to minimize trade-offs in very particular pilot areas across the region that we have worked in. About capacity building, there are now training programs on environmental impact assessment, strategic environmental assessment, appropriate assessment, on integrating ecological corridors into plans of other sectors. There's also a handbook coming up on that. We have developed e-learning tools for spatial planners, and we have provided trainings both indoors and outdoors in the field. Then about filling the data gaps, which is also so important. Through the partnerships, we now have a very sound map of ecological corridors in the Carpathians that were also confirmed. I mean, these corridors were confirmed by national stakeholders, and all these data have been uploaded into the Carpathian data storage system called CBIS. About the methodologies and tools developed, I would like to highlight 2. One is the methodology for identifying ecological corridors. The other one is guidelines how to minimize the impact of transport infrastructure development on nature. Both have been endorsed by the Carpathian Convention and its parties. And similarly, the methodology for standardized monitoring of ecological connectivity. And then something quite innovative. This is a data infrastructure that has been set up to bring together data developed in different ways. There is a Q-Field app that was developed for field experts. We have a roadkill app that can be used by citizens. We have data from camera traps, and all that is being then brought together and processed in a central data repository. And I would like to also highlight that this afternoon there is a workshop on these aspects. So for all the details, I encourage you to attend this workshop. Then about policy advocacy, we are lucky to have the Carpathian Convention in place, which serves as a platform that brings together governmental but also non-governmental players from the 7 Carpathian countries, so that we can then discuss but also get endorsed important outputs of these projects. For example, the Joint Action Plan on Sustainable Transportation, the International Action Plan on Conservation of Large Carnivores and Ensuring Ecological Connectivity. Through this Carpathian Convention platform, we have advocated for implementation and, in generally speaking, for mainstreaming ecological connectivity into policies. And we are also, since recently, lobbying for a biodiversity connectivity standard. Another platform we are using is the EU strategy for the Danube region. And here we have facilitated a joint declaration that on ecological connectivity in the Danube Carpathian region that has been endorsed by these by several EU SDR priority areas that work on environmental topics, by the International Commission for the Danube River and the Carpathian Convention. And this now is gives us the possibility also to talk to higher level decision makers that are responsible for bringing these different stakeholder groups together, the different ministries, for example, that all need to contribute to maintaining and restoring connectivity. And something that we are making best use of is the European Green Deal, in particular its EU Biodiversity Strategy 2030, which puts forward the target for the 27 EU member states, but of course also indirectly for the candidate countries of the EU, such as Ukraine, that 30% of the land should be protected, and 1/3 of that needs to be strictly protected. Another target under the biodiversity strategy is also to ensure clear management objectives and effective management and monitoring of protected areas, that restoration potential should also be considered, and that as sort of an ultimate goal, and a transnational European network of nature should be created that includes functionally connected system with ecological corridors. And the so-called pledging process has already started. That means the EU member states have to provide draft plans to the European Commission, how they want to achieve these targets for their countries. So that's, of course, a prime opportunity to now leverage all these policies, the tools, the methodologies that we have developed here in the region to really get them to implementation. So what's next? One exciting next step is engagement in the Natura Connect Horizon project of WWF. And here, together with a vast partnership, we are off to designing or supporting the design of a resilient and coherent trans-European network for nature and people. So this is the partnership. It consists of 15 research organizations and also 7 NGOs, such as WWF. And what we aim at achieving over the coming 3.5 years is to really provide the member states with tools, with recommendations, how best to achieve this 30% protection target and the 10% strictly protection target. Then emphasis, of course, is on ecological corridors, how to identify and prioritize them, how to make them really work. But then also the financing aspect is, of course, very important, in particular for our part of Europe, where state budgets are rather slim. So we need to think about how to actually get these solutions also funded. I'm actually just out of a 3-day kickoff meeting of this project, and I'm happy to share some sort of insights that I have gained of aspects that need to be considered when designing such an ecological network. One is fairness. We are talking about corridors that cross countries, nature networks crossing country borders. And of course, it cannot be that one country does most of the job and the others sort of lean back and say, well, job is done by my neighbor. I don't need to do anything anymore. So that is important. Then it's also important to design for the future. I mean, although decisions are being taken today, we need to think about how the world is going to change over the coming decades, because this is a long-term process. And of course, climate change is one very important aspect that needs to be considered, but also, for example, the impact of changing trade patterns, which can have an impact on land use, for example, on agriculture, what is being grown where, on infrastructure, such as renewable energy or transport infrastructure, where. So all that needs to be taken into consideration when optimizing where to place what type of corridors and also how to make it happen. So of course, ideally, the corridors we will have in the end will serve multiple functions. So corridors that maybe we have designed primarily for large carnivores, we need to prioritize those that also have other functions. Acceptance, of course, is very important. If local people don't see a benefit, the level of acceptance will be low and sustainability will be low. It is, I would say, smart to identify sort of safe bets where we know that multiple stakeholders see a benefit. But we also need to think about displacement of impact. If we manage to protect, let's say, strong corridors in one end, in one country of Europe, does that mean that in other parts, maybe for example, agriculture will be intensified in order to make up for less agricultural use in the corridor areas? So that is, of course, also something that needs to be avoided. All that, of course, relates to also weighing ecosystem services. What is most important to stakeholders? Is it wildlife watching? Is it hunting? Is it pest control? Is it climate change mitigation? So in order to sort of find the common ground and assume that when we focus on that, we will achieve the highest acceptance. And of course, we should not forget that saving nature for its intrinsic value should always be part of these discussions. And then the last question is, once we have agreed on corridors, how best to conserve them? Protection, the classical protection status, it might be the best solution in many cases, but not always. There are also other effective conservation measures that need to be considered and that are also acceptable, for example, for the European framework. Or maybe it's a matter of applying the right common agricultural policy measures, so support mechanisms for farmers so that they have an incentive to use areas in a more sustainable manner, and which would imply that maybe a protector status, for example, is not necessary. And just to highlight that one of the case studies of this project is the Danube-Carpathian region. So we can feed in all the results of the past 10 years and hopefully then get support for actually achieving implementation and application. So in conclusion, I would like to highlight that maintaining ecological connectivity requires active cooperation of different stakeholders at all levels. So different stakeholders, that means nature conservation, hunting, agriculture, forestry, water management, and so on, from the local level, where the impact happens, to the international level, where the policy is being made, or at least many policies. The second point is that we now have a very nice toolbox of solutions that have been developed with a vast array of partners and involving stakeholders. And these practical guidelines of identifying corridors, these interactive GIS maps, strategic documents can now be put to use. We also have a prime opportunity of using the favorable policy framework that we have at the moment, both at the EU level, but also regionally, that is promoting long-term conservation, which of course includes also functioning corridors. So that's a super important chance to start a journey which will certainly be a long one. Although there is a target of achieving all that to the year 2030, it's clear that the whole process and its impact will take decades. And sustainability certainly depends on balancing interests. Those of today the decisions are being made, but also it's very important to anticipate change to achieve this sustainability. So together we can reach more. I think this has been one of the prime conclusions of the past 10 years, and I'm looking forward to further cooperation with these many fantastic partners that we have worked with. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Irene, for the very nice presentation. It was really inspiring.
Okay.
Yes.
It's just a comment. The new biodiversity strategy with the new impacts for nature conservation on Natura 2000 and so on has this network to create a resilient network. But from the national perspective, we asked the EU about a guideline to stimulate our Bundesländer to give us information, and there is nothing. So my impression is that the EU focuses, as she always did, on Natura 2000 and not on the networks itself. And if it focuses on a network, then it is only due to Natura 2000 and not beside Natura 2000. And for Europe, we need also a network beside Natura 2000. I think you know this. Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is, I mean, from what I've heard in the European Commission saying, it's not only about Natura 2000, of course, it's also about national protected areas, and it's about extending the network. And that is both, I mean, strengthening connectivity and resilience within these protected areas, be they European or be they national, but also between these areas. So I think it's clear to the European Commission that this connectivity aspect is central. I mean, from what I know, there will be more guidance coming. And that's also one reason why this Horizon project is funded. So my impression is that this will not be left to the member states alone. There will also be support and push coming from the European level.
Thank you very much for the answer. Let's see another question. Okay, nobody? Come on. I want at least one more. Should I pick anyone? Okay.
How do you use the results of our Horizon project, the Bison project? Do you integrate our results, or is there a planned cooperation between us?
If you refer to Natura Connect, that is very clear. That's actually one of the activities that are very high up on the list, is to bring together this community of projects or recently finished projects that have been dealing with connectivity to make sure that we are finally connecting the dots. So the answer is yes. Bison will be part of those projects with whom cooperation will be established and in order to jointly profit from our tools and knowledge.
Thank you, Irene. Yeah, I think that it's really important, to connect all these projects related to the same topic. So for sure, I think this is important to come not just, from one or two sides, but from everybody who is actually implementing the same or the such projects in the same topic. Okay, another question? No questions. Okay, Irene, sorry, it seems that all the questions were addressed. Thank you very much again for being here with us today, for taking the time. If you can still join us on Zoom, you are of course very welcome, because we are going to have some more interesting sessions. And yeah, thanks again. Thank you. Bye-bye.